The music was already playing when my sister's name lit up my phone. I had maybe 40 seconds before the doors opened. My hands were shaking just enough that the bouquet of ivory ranunculus trembled against my fingers. The coordinator had just whispered through the door that everything was ready. Marcus was at the altar. 200 guests were seated in the restored ballroom on Randolph Street in Chicago's West Loop, waiting. I had a veil pinned to my hair and a dress I had spent 11 months paying off. I almost let it ring. But something in me already knew. The way you know a storm is close before the sky changes. I answered. Brooke laughed before she said a word. Not a real laugh. The kind of laugh people use when they want you to understand that what's coming was intentional. Don't hold up the music waiting for Dad, she said. He chose to stay with me. The room went completely quiet around me. I mean that literally the candle on the vanity, the hum of voices through the wall, the rustle of my own dress, all of it seemed to stop, because those words had a specific shape I had been trained since childhood to recognize. That wasn't news. That was a blade. Why? I whispered. Because some of us still need him, she said. Not everyone has everything figured out the way you do. She hung up before I could answer. I stood in my wedding dress in front of a full-length mirror, holding a dead phone, and felt something in my chest go wrong. Not break, just shift. The way a door shifts in a frame when the house settles and it stops closing the same way it used to. I want to be honest with you, because honesty is the only reason I'm telling this story. I had spent years building a life that looked stable from the outside. Teaching third grade at a school in Pilsen, marrying a man who remembered the things that mattered, keeping my distance from the patterns that raised me. But Brooke had always known exactly where the oldest wound lived. And she called me with 5 minutes on the clock, because that's what you do when you want someone to bleed quietly in front of an audience. The door opened behind me. Ruth Calloway walked in without knocking, because Ruth had never needed permission to show up. She was 71 years old, with silver hair in a neat bun and hands that had spent 30 years in neonatal care before she retired. She had been the overnight nurse the week my grandmother passed, and she had simply never left our lives. She took one look at me, not at the dress, not at the flowers at me, and closed the door. What did she do? Ruth asked. 4 words. And they undid me quietly, because she didn't say what happened. She said what Brooke did. Like she already understood the architecture of what I was standing inside. I handed her my phone without speaking. Brooke had sent a follow-up text after the call, short and deliberately timed. Ruth read it once. Her face went still in the specific way that calm people go still when they are actually furious. She sent this now, she said. Not a question. 4 minutes before the ceremony, I said. Ruth set the phone down. Cruelty loves precision. It needs you too close to the edge to recover before the room is watching. I wanted to defend them. I always wanted to defend them. That's the conditioning. Spend enough years explaining your family's worst moments to yourself as misunderstandings, and eventually it becomes involuntary. Maybe Dad didn't understand how it would land. Maybe Brooke was genuinely frightened. Maybe this was just complicated, and I was reading malice into chaos. But I had used those explanations like a bandage over a wound that needed stitches. And standing there, the bandage wouldn't hold anymore. She said he chose her, I said. Not that he was delayed. Not that there was confusion. She said he chose to stay with her. Ruth stepped closer and put a hand on my arm. Simone, the fact that your father failed you today does not mean you are difficult to love. It means he made a choice. Those are not the same thing. I looked at myself in the mirror, and a memory moved through me without asking. I was 24. I had just won the Chicago Metro District's Young Educator Award, the first-year teacher to receive it in 23 years. The ceremony was held at a downtown hotel. My principal had called it one of the highest honors the district offered. My mother promised my father would be there. At 6:15, 15 minutes after the program started, my phone buzzed. Dad, Brooke had a photography client emergency. He'd gone to help her load equipment. He said I'd understand. He said I was always the strong one. I stood on a stage holding a certificate in front of 300 people and looked at an empty chair. Ruth had been in the audience that night. She found me afterward near the hotel vending machines, standing very still, and she said something I didn't fully understand until years later. She said, "A person who keeps needing to be strong for her family's comfort is not strong. She is just alone." I had thought about those words more times than I could count. I still want him here, I said. My throat ached saying it out loud. Of course you do, Ruth said. Wanting your father is not weakness, but wanting him doesn't mean he has earned the right to stand beside you today. A soft knock came through the door. The coordinator whispered that Marcus had sent a question. Was everything all right? Did I need anything at all? That almost finished me. Because Marcus could feel me from across a building. My own father could look through me from across a room. One man had learned every quiet signal I made without being taught. The other had been taught for 30 years and never once passed the lesson. I should have been walking toward Marcus right now. Instead, I was standing still, holding wreckage. I need to know what she told him, I said. Ruth nodded. Then let's stop letting her write the story. When I opened the bridal suite door, my hands had stopped shaking. But my heart felt bruised from the inside, the specific bruise that only comes from people who were supposed to protect you. The hallway of the West Loop Ballroom was lined with black and white photographs from the building's history big band nights, formal galas, decades of Chicago evenings that had become legend. It should have felt warm and beautiful. Instead, it felt like a tunnel leading directly back into the family pattern I had spent a decade trying to exit. I made it 12 steps before I saw her. Brooke Hayes stood at the far end of the corridor in her champagne bridesmaid dress. One shoulder leaned against the wall, scrolling her phone like she was waiting for a table at a restaurant. She looked the way she always looked, polished, settled, positioned, like she had already decided how every room would respond to her before she entered it. She had built her career around weddings. Styled portraits, curated reception layouts, editorial content for boutique venues. She understood, better than almost anyone I knew, how to control what people saw. She had spent the morning making sure what they saw of me was damage. There she is, she said. I was starting to wonder if you'd stay in there until everyone figured it out on their own. I stopped a few feet away. Where is Dad? She tilted her head. With me. Like I told you. Ruth's voice came from behind me, even and unhurried. That must have taken real effort to arrange. Brooke's eyes moved to Ruth with the particular contempt she reserved for people she couldn't easily categorize. This is a family conversation. Then it should have been handled like one, Ruth said. Brooke's smile sharpened. You called in your old nurse friend on your wedding day. I think that tells people something. Tell me what you said to him, I said. I told him the truth. You told him whatever would make him afraid of losing you. She didn't flinch. Maybe he agreed with me. Maybe he finally acknowledged that I needed him more. There it was. The sentence underneath every argument, every Christmas dinner gone sideways, every birthday where she needed more candles, more toasts, more evidence. Brooke had never wanted love as much as she wanted proof. Proof that she mattered more. Proof that her claim on our father was senior to mine. And the tragedy, I mean that honestly, because there was real tragedy in it, was that she had been fighting a competition nobody else was playing. She could not conceive of a world where both daughters were celebrated without something being taken from her. Love, to Brooke, had always been a finite resource. You needed him more, I said carefully. Today, on my wedding day. You have a stable job, she said. A good man who adores you. Half the Pilsen school community here calling you a hero because you listen to 8-year-olds. You love being the quiet one who rises above it all. The noble sister. Her voice was steady and clean and precise. I'm the one people actually notice when I fall apart. You'll survive disappointment. That's what you do. Honestly, and I'm not proud of it for one second, I almost felt sorry for her. That sentence was the most honest thing she had said to me in years. She genuinely believed the attention she needed was something she had to take from somewhere. She genuinely believed that my ability to endure was proof she mattered less. The tragedy was that she had built her entire identity on being the one who was noticed, and any light that didn't include her felt like extinction. But I had stopped dressing her emptiness up as pain a long time ago. So you called me 5 minutes before my wedding, I said, to make sure I'd walk in looking publicly abandoned. Because you needed to know you still could. Her face hardened. I called to remind you that you're not the center of this family just because you found someone willing to marry you. The old version of me would have gone quiet. She would have softened her voice and found the exit that hurt no one. I had walked that exit so many times I had worn a groove through it. That woman was not standing in this hallway. This is my wedding, I said. You were invited to stand beside me. Somehow that still wasn't enough. Everyone has been saying all morning how beautiful this is, she said. The Teacher and the Engineer. Humble love story. Sweet. Moving. Her voice stayed smooth and poisonous. Nobody has asked once about my work. My photos. The centerpieces I helped design. So yes, I needed Dad to stay with me, because at least then someone in this family was paying attention to me today. Before I could answer, my mother appeared at the end of the hallway. Carol Hayes moved fast, heels clicking, mascara already gone from under her eyes. Please, she said when she reached us. Not here, not like this. I turned to her. Did you know? She looked at Brooke, then back at me. That one glance told me everything. Mom, did you know Dad was not planning to walk me down the aisle? He was upset, she said. Your sister was upset. Everything happened so fast, and I thought he would come around before the ceremony. She couldn't finish it. The coordinator materialized at the far end of the hall, looking pale and professionally distressed. Simone. We really do need to begin in the next 2 minutes. Then the side door opened. My father walked in. Gerald Hayes looked the way men look when they know they've done something they cannot explain away. He was in his dark suit, which fit the same way it had at my college graduation, slightly too wide at the shoulders, like it had been bought for a version of him that never quite solidified. His eyes moved through the hallway, the way eyes move when they are searching for the version of events that costs the least to acknowledge. Brooke's composure fractured the instant she saw him. Dad, why are you here? That question was its own answer. He had been positioned elsewhere, because she expected him to stay there. Something had shifted. I need to talk to Simone, he said. We already talked about this, she said. He flinched at we. I had watched that flinch my entire life. The way he yielded to her, we, her, us, her, our family, like she was the one who got to define what those words meant. She didn't ask for his support. She claimed it. She always had. Were you going to let me stand there? I said, waiting for you? His mouth opened. Silence. Gerald. My mother's voice was barely a whisper. Please. Ruth stood beside me, still and steady, the way she had stood in every room where I needed someone who wasn't going to look away. Finally, my father said, I was going to come in. Before the music started. I was going to find you. Before the music started, I said. Or, after I had already understood you weren't coming. His jaw tightened. Your sister was frightened, he said. Of what? Brooke cut in immediately. Of being replaced. Of standing in a corner while everyone in this room falls over themselves to celebrate you. Of being invisible at my own sister's wedding. Nobody made you invisible, I said. You were in my wedding party. You were going to be in every photograph. You were supposed to be standing beside me. As decoration, she said. As proof you're the forgiving little sister. That's all I've ever been to you. Ruth spoke quietly. A sister who loved her would have protected this morning. Brooke turned to her with real anger in her eyes. Don't lecture my family. I'm not lecturing, Ruth said. I'm noting what love looks like when it shows up. My father raised one hand. Enough. The word landed with the same hollow weight it always had issued after the damage was done, designed to stop the bleeding without naming the wound. He had said enough my entire childhood. He said it when Brooke went too far at dinner. He said it when she cut me down at Christmas gatherings in front of people who laughed because she said it with charm. He said it, and then he turned to whatever was easier, and Brooke learned that enough meant nothing, and I learned that enough was all I was going to get. What did you tell her about me? I asked him. What did you say that she repeated back to me this morning? His eyes moved to Brooke. She answered before he could stop her. He said, you turn everything into a test, that you always have to make things hard. She realized what she'd done half a second too late. I looked at my father. Thank you, I said. Both of you. His face went pale. Simone, I didn't mean it the way it... How did you mean it? Silence. You tell Brooke I make things hard, I said. My voice stayed low, but the hallway seemed to lean toward it. And you tell me I'm the strong one. You reward whoever is loudest and call the quiet one difficult when she finally stops being quiet. You have done that my entire life. And you have called it keeping the peace. Mom was crying openly now. He's here. He came. That's what matters, sweetheart. I turned to her carefully. because I knew she had spent 30 years trying to hold this family together with insufficient materials, and I did not want to be cruel to her. He came because the story would look bad, not because I was hurting. Those are not the same thing. Dad's face crumpled. I did not look away. I did not rescue him from the moment the way I had been rescuing everyone from their moments my entire life. If I hadn't found out, I said, would you have come to me before the ceremony and told me yourself? The silence that followed was the most complete silence I have ever heard in a room full of people. He looked at the floor. The floor answered for him. Let me walk you down the aisle, he said then, fast and quiet, like the words could outrun what had just happened. Please, Simone, let me do that. And here's what I need you to understand. If you have ever spent your whole life waiting for one specific person to show up, not any person, that person, you know what those words do to you. They find the oldest wound without trying. The part that sat in auditoriums, scanning every row for his face. The part that rewrote disappointment into misunderstanding so there was still a reason to hope. Part of me wanted to say yes. Wanted to grab that offer like a lifeline and call it healing and let the moment be what I had imagined it could be, once, a long time ago. But I had learned the difference between a gift and a rescue attempt. He was not offering because he had protected me. He was offering because the doors were about to open and 200 people would see what he had done. No, I said. He blinked. Mom made a small sound. Brooke began to smile, the specific smile she wore when she thought my pain was about to become her story again. Simone. He said my name the way he always said it when he wanted forgiveness without a full apology. Don't do this. Please. I looked at him carefully. One last time. The man who called my career sweet but not especially practical. The man who remembered every one of Brooke's photo shoots, every professional setback, every new chapter she announced, but forgot my teaching award, my graduate school pinning ceremony. The afternoon I called him to say Marcus had proposed. He wasn't a monster. That was the hardest part. He was a father who loved me in theory, and failed me in practice, over and over, and expected the theory to be enough. You don't get to perform fatherhood for the first time when there's an audience watching, I said. Then I turned around. Ruth was standing one step behind me, hands folded, eyes full but completely steady. She looked startled when my gaze found her genuinely surprised, the way people are surprised who have spent their whole lives loving without expecting to be chosen for it. That was exactly why I wanted her there. Ruth, I said. And my voice shook when I said it. She looked at me. You were in that auditorium the night I won the district award and my father didn't come. You found me afterward by the vending machines and you said something I've thought about every year since. You signed my graduate school recommendation letter when I had no professional references with enough standing to do it. You sent a card when I started teaching at Hernandez Elementary that said, the children who feel unseen will recognize you. You drove to this building this morning without asking what you'd get from it. You have never once shown up because someone was watching. Her eyes filled completely. If anyone walks beside me right now, I said, it should be the person who earned that place before there was anything to gain from it. Mom sobbed into her hands. Brooke's voice cracked. You are replacing our father with a retired nurse at your own wedding? I'm not replacing anyone, I said. I'm choosing the person who showed up. Everyone is going to think you're making some kind of statement. Good, I said. Maybe some statements need witnesses. Dad stepped forward. Simone, please don't embarrass me in there. That sentence settled something in me permanently. I saw, for one moment, the little girl inside me who had spent 20 years trying to protect him from the weight of his own choices. The one who rewrote every disappointment into a misunderstanding so the story could still end with him being good. Then I let that little girl rest. She had been working far too long. I'm not embarrassing you, I said. I'm refusing to hide what you chose. Ruth offered me her arm. Her hand was trembling. Mine was too. The music shifted from the other side of the doors, full and solemn, and people began to rise. Brooke looked from me to Ruth to my father, searching the room for the lever that would put her back in control. She did not find one. The doors opened. I placed my hand on Ruth's arm. I lifted my chin, and I walked forward not as the daughter they had spent decades forgetting, as the woman they had run out of room to manage. The ceremony room was all golden light and dark wood, and white roses on long tables. I felt the question moving through the guests, the way you feel weather moving through a room, wordless but present. Where was Gerald Hayes? Why was this older woman walking with the bride? Why was Carol Hayes in the third row with red eyes? The old reflex rose in my throat. Explain. Soften. Make everyone comfortable. Take up less space. Ruth tightened her arm under my hand and whispered, "Keep moving." So I did. At the end of that aisle, Marcus Webb stood in a navy suit, steady, contained, solid as the buildings he spent his career designing. He watched me come toward him. He did not look toward my father for context. He did not look confused. He looked at me the way he looked at me the first time I cried in front of him, and then apologized for crying, like he genuinely could not understand why I was apologizing. When we reached him, Ruth placed my hand in Marcus's. Then she kissed my cheek and said, close enough that only we could hear it, "You were never hard to love. You were just surrounded by people who made love hard." Marcus heard her. He ran his thumb gently across my knuckles. "I've got you," he said. The ceremony began. Words moved through the room about love, and choosing each other and what it means to build something together that neither person could have built alone. I kept my shoulders back. I kept my eyes forward. I could feel my father somewhere behind me, and I did not turn. I had spent enough years facing backward. When it was time for vows, Marcus went first. He spoke about learning to love someone who had been trained to ask for less than she deserved. He said he had watched me listen to other people's children with a patience most parents couldn't sustain, and that he understood why, because I knew what it cost to need someone to hear you and have them look away instead. He said he wasn't rescuing me from anything. He was joining a life I had already fought to build. And he wanted to spend the rest of his building it beside me. There were tears on more than one face in that room. Then it was my turn. I had written careful, measured vows weeks before, but the woman standing at that altar could not speak only in careful anymore. "I used to believe that love meant being easy to choose," I said. "I thought if I asked for less, forgave faster, and stayed quiet long enough, the people who were supposed to choose me would eventually see that I was worth it. What I understand now is that real love does not make you compete for a place at the table. Real love does not use your patience as permission to disappear on you. Real love shows up quietly, consistently, and without an audience." Marcus's eyes filled. Then my father's voice came from somewhere near the back of the room. "Simone." The room went still in the way rooms go still when something unrehearsed breaks through. I turned slowly. Gerald Hayes stood beside the last row of chairs, both hands gripping the back of one like it was the only solid thing in the room. My mother stood at his side. Brooke was near the side aisle, frozen, with an expression I had never seen on her face before, something between fury and fear, like the ground had shifted underneath her. "I failed my daughter," Dad said. A sound moved through the room. Not gasps, something quieter and more permanent than gasps. "Recognition. Not just today," he said. His voice broke on the word today. I told myself she was strong enough to absorb what I put down. I called it faith in her strength. It was cowardice dressed up as a compliment. Brooke moved forward. "Dad, stop. You're humiliating all of us." He didn't stop. Her voice rose. "She has done this her entire life. She stays quiet and patient and then positions herself so everyone around her feels like a monster. She is doing it right now. She is standing at an altar letting you destroy yourself for her benefit, and none of you can see it." Heads turned not toward me, toward her. Marcus stepped slightly in front of me. Not blocking me. Standing with me. Ruth turned from the front row. Her voice was clear and quiet. A sister who loved her would have protected this morning. Brooke flushed dark. Her whole rescue team assembled in one room. "Of course." Dad's voice came again, lower now. "Enough, Brooke." That word landed differently than it ever had. For once, it came before the damage was finished. Brooke looked at him like he had become a stranger. "You're choosing her." He held her gaze, and did not yield. "I'm choosing the truth." The room held its breath. Brooke opened her mouth. Nothing came out. The power she had spent a lifetime accumulating depended entirely on my father protecting her from the moment her choices caught up with her. In that room, in front of those witnesses, he stopped. I turned back to Marcus. "I'm getting married now," I said. The officiant nodded. We exchanged rings with hands that shook and eyes that didn't. When the words were spoken and the rings were placed, and the officiant pronounced us husband and wife, the applause that came up from that room was not the polite applause of a wedding. It was the applause of a room that had witnessed something true and needed to answer it. It sounded like relief. It sounded like witness. It sounded like the specific joy of watching someone who deserved better finally receive better. The reception moved to the outdoor courtyard, where string lights hung between old brick walls and white roses sat in low arrangements on long dinner tables under an October Chicago sky. For about 40 minutes, I let myself believe the rest of the night could simply be beautiful. Marcus held my hand. Ruth was surrounded by people who wanted to thank her, and every time I heard someone say she had done the right thing, one more tight place in my chest released. Then Brooke's voice rose over the music. You humiliated me for her. The courtyard quieted. She was standing near the bar, facing my father, shaking with the effort of keeping her voice from climbing further. My mother stood between them with both hands raised, still trying to reassemble pieces that no longer fit the same shape. Dad looked exhausted, but something in him had changed. Maybe shame had finally done what love should have done years before. No, he said. You humiliated yourself. Brooke stared at him. After everything I have sacrificed for this family, everything I have done, you are going to stand here and defend her. I'm not defending her, he said. I'm admitting I failed her. That's different. A woman near the edge of the courtyard, Denise, who ran a boutique event company in River North and had hired Brooke for 2 major shoots, asked quietly, Is it true you called the bride before the ceremony to tell her father wasn't coming? Brooke's face changed. In 3 seconds, she understood what had shifted. This was no longer a family argument behind closed doors. This was professional. The wedding industry she had spent years cultivating was standing in this courtyard, and it was watching. That is not what happened, she said too quickly. She twisted it. I walked forward before Marcus could reach for my hand, though he stayed close. Then tell us what happened, I said. Brooke looked around the courtyard. Guests were watching. My father was watching. My mother, for once, did not step in to soften the truth. Brooke's composure came apart cleanly. I was tired, she said, and her voice shook with something that was finally real. I was so tired of watching everyone in this family fall over themselves to celebrate her. The humble teacher. The woman who saves children. Everyone loves a saint. Nobody looks twice at the sister standing in the corner with the bouquet she was handed. I needed Dad to stay with me. I needed to know I still had something she didn't. The courtyard was very quiet. You did have something, I said. You had a place beside me today. I gave you that place. You chose to turn it into a weapon. You think you won, she said. This was never a game to me, I said. That's why you're standing where you are. The venue manager stepped forward gently and told her it was time to go. She looked at my father one last time, waiting for the old rescue, the intervention, the please, everyone, let's calm down, the hand on her shoulder that would pull her back from the consequences of what she had chosen. He didn't move. That was the real consequence. Not being escorted out. Not the whispers, not the professional damage of being seen this clearly by the people she most needed to impress. The consequence was that the person who had always shielded her from the weight of her own choices finally stepped back and let her feel it. She was walked out through the side gate, still calling my name, still trying to become the victim of a fire she had built and lit herself. When the gate closed, the courtyard felt different. Not repaired. Not perfect. Just honest. Later, after the first dance, after Marcus and I had finally eaten something and taken our first full breath, my father found me near the far edge of the courtyard. He stood a few feet away, like he wasn't sure he'd earned the distance closed. I see it now, he said. I know seeing it late doesn't make it right. I looked at him for a long time. Part of me wanted to close that distance immediately, because daughters don't stop wanting their fathers just because fathers fail them. But I had learned the difference between genuine healing and bypassing the wound entirely. If you want a relationship with me, I said, it cannot be built on me staying quiet. You don't get to call my pain dramatic. You don't get to use the word family to ask me to absorb disrespect. And one honest moment, as significant as it is, doesn't restore what you lost today. That takes time, and it takes consistency. Not promises. His eyes filled. I understand. Maybe he did. Time would tell. I had learned to let time tell instead of deciding in advance. Later in the evening, Ruth raised her glass for a toast and said, Every child deserves adults who show up before there's an audience. And every adult should understand that love is not proven by how much you need someone, it's proven by how consistently you protect them. The courtyard went quiet, and then filled with something that felt like relief. This is what I carried away from that day and what I want to leave with you before I go. Being easy to manage is not a virtue. Being low maintenance does not mean you need less love. It means you were trained to ask for less. The mistake I made for 30 years was confusing my own endurance with evidence that what was happening to me was acceptable. Strength is not the same as not hurting, and the people who praise you for being strong are sometimes the same people depending on your silence to keep hurting you without consequence. What she understood, and what took me a wedding day to fully understand, is that being chosen by the wrong people, on the wrong terms, is not worth losing yourself to receive. Real love does not require you to earn your place at the table. Real love sets that place before you arrive. The one thing I did differently that day, the one thing I want you to think about, is that I stopped protecting the people whose comfort depended on my pain. That is not revenge. It is not performance. It is just the moment you decide that your own dignity is no longer a price someone else gets to charge. Ask yourself this, genuinely. Is there a person in your life who only shows up once the damage is already visible? And have you been calling that a relationship so long that you forgot what the word is actually supposed to mean? I want to know if this story reached you today. Drop a 1 in the comments if you think I was right to say no to my father. Drop a 2 if you think I should have let him walk me down the aisle anyway. Drop a 3 if you have ever been in a family where being easy to hurt got called being easy to love. Tell me where you're watching from, what city, what time of day, because I am genuinely moved that these stories travel as far as they do. And if you have ever stood in a room waiting for someone who was supposed to protect you to finally choose you, your waiting was not weakness. It was love. You deserved better than what it got you. If this story meant something to you, subscribe and stay close. We tell stories here about the things families do when no one is watching, and why bringing those things into the light is sometimes the most loving act of all. I'll see you in the next one. This is a fictional story inspired by real emotional experiences, fully rewritten and reimagined in Chicago, Illinois to create original content. Any resemblance to real people or events is entirely coincidental.